Hey there Star Seekers, hope you're all doing alright. My name's Luke and welcome back to Star or Shovelware. So today on the channel we're going to be taking a look at Art of Rally. It's a third person racing game brought to us by the creators of Absolute Drift, and it sees you hitting the dirt with a selection of iconic rally cars from the 60s to the 80s as you race your way across the globe in randomly generated events, all to the sound of an awesome 80s synthwave soundtrack. Now Art of Rally has been well received on PC, but let's dive into this review and see whether the Switch port is worth your cash. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to keep up to date with my latest reviews and content. So Art of Rally released last year on Steam and it's just been ported to consoles, where it's available for £19.49 on the UK eShop and $24.99 on the US eShop. Surprisingly, Art of Rally actually has a bit of a storyline to it, and it centres around the so-called golden era of rallying and its infamous Group B regulations. Due to a high number of fatalities, Group B was actually disestablished in the 80s, but the game dares to imagine an alternative timeline where this was never the case, and so you get to experience it in all its glory. Now the game's career mode follows your journey from the 60s to the 80s and sees you racing from Group B all the way through to Groups S and A, and while the story really doesn't matter too much with this one, it's always nice to have a little bit of narrative behind the gameplay. Now before we get started on gameplay, I will confess that I'm not the biggest racing game fan. I usually prefer games where I can vent some road rage and smash people up, but Art of Rally plays a little differently from your typical racer. To start with, the camera is set high up and back from your car, giving the game a kind of Micro Machines World Series feel, and while you might expect it to play more like an arcade racer, it still manages to retain the feel of a simulation game. Having said this though, the controls are incredibly simple and easy to grasp, and they basically consist of the L and R triggers handling the brake and accelerate, while the A button activates your handbrake. Now the ability to modify difficulty settings such as computer skill level and car damage make the game accessible to even novice gamers, but just like Absolute Drift, the skill cap is still pretty high for this one, and achieving the top times on the online leaderboards will still take plenty of practice. The racing itself can be a little tricky to start with, but after learning that I couldn't just go full throttle into corners, I eventually got the hang of things, and I was even able to perform the odd sweet drift using the handbrake. So as I said before, the game's career mode takes you from the 60s to the 80s, and it sees you racing through randomly generated events throughout a variety of racing groups. Each of these events takes you to a different country, and they consist of a series of races which last around 2 to 5 minutes, with the seasons, weather and time of day switched up between races. There's a decent number of track layouts for each country, with surfaces such as tarmac, gravel and dirt all having an impact on your car's handling, but the real challenge comes with the rain, and I really struggled to keep my car on the track when the ground was wet. Now each year of career mode sees you competing in a number of different events, as you race from a start point to an end point trying to complete tracks as fast as you can. Being a rally game, you won't find any of your competitors alongside you on the track, but your completion times are pitted against your AI opponents, and placements are given at the end of each race, with higher placements awarding you more points on the overall group leaderboards. Completing all of the races in a group unlocks the next group, and if you happen to fail a race, either by smashing up your car or simply racing like I do, you don't need to worry too much, as you're given 5 chances to replay any of the races throughout the current league. If you happen to be a racing god or just not shit like me and manage to actually achieve first position in the event, you'll unlock new cars and liveries, and there is some great variety to the game's cars, with each of them modelled after iconic cars of the era, and I was actually quite surprised by how different the handling of each car felt. Now alongside career mode, you also have a free roam mode which opens up the map to you, allowing you to explore the area, find picturesque points of interest and collect various pickups strewn about the place. There's also a time trial mode where you can pick a car from any group and then race a single track to try and earn your spot on the online leaderboards, a custom rally mode which allows you to build your own rally events by selecting a series of tracks and then adjusting their parameters before hitting the tarmac, and lastly there are online events, which I presume are daily and weekly challenges for you to compete in, but for some reason they didn't want to load up for me. So while they may not be everyone's cup of tea, I really love the low poly visual style of the game, and aside from making it stand out amongst its competitors, they also put less of a strain on hardware like the Switch, which can sometimes struggle with more visually demanding games. Unfortunately though, the amount of flora and fauna have still had to be stripped back quite a bit, and the rain weather effect appears to have been removed entirely, but each region still looks pretty good, and I especially enjoy the visual variety offered by seasonal changes, as well as all the little people who part like the Red Sea each time you try to mow them down. The cars themselves all look great, with each having their own unique design, and the game includes a photo mode allowing for some great snaps of the landscape and your favourite car. Now when it comes to audio, while there isn't much to say on the sound effects side of things other than the cars sounding decent and us getting a nice little cheer each time we pass spectators, the game's soundtrack more than makes up for this, with some absolutely banging synthwave tracks. Aside from it being one of my favourite genres, its rhythmic tones are a perfect match for the gameplay, and the Art of Drift OST instantly found its way into my list of top game soundtracks, as well as my Amazon Music playlist. Now while the Switch handles the visuals without experiencing too many performance issues, I did still have some minor frame rate drops, and there is still quite a lot of popping of environmental objects. I also had a couple of graphical hitches with trees growing out of the track on the odd occasion, but aside from these, the only other issue I encountered was the online events not wanting to load. All in all though, the Switch port of Art of Rally is still a decent one, it's a welcome diversion from traditional racers, and it does have plenty to offer to fans of the genre. When it comes to my own personal rating, I'm going to be giving Art of Rally 4 out of 5 stars. If you're looking for a racing game with a bit of a difference, then Art of Rally is well worth checking out. Even if you're terrible at racing games like I am, its difficulty settings make it accessible, and if nothing else, at least you've got that awesome soundtrack to play along to. And that about does it for this review of Art of Rally on the Nintendo Switch. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed it, and let me know your thoughts and opinions on the game in the comment section below. Subscribe to keep up to date with my latest reviews and content, and until next time, thanks a lot for watching, take care, and game on.